He looked me in the eye and said, "She gives me everything you never could." I was on my knees, begging him to stay. He left anyway. What he didn't know was that I was worth 8 times more than she'd ever be. My name is Camille Rhodes, and this is how the man I loved walked away thinking I was nothing, and how I let him believe it. We met in college during our sophomore year at the University of Michigan. I was the quiet girl, always in the back of the classroom, focused, composed, invisible when I wanted to be. I didn't talk much about where I came from because I didn't want people making assumptions. My father was a venture capitalist. My mother ran an international art foundation. But I dressed like I shopped at thrift stores. I carried a scuffed-up backpack, reused my notebooks from high school, and commuted by bus. I was worth millions on paper, but I didn't act like it. I met him, Eli Navarro, in an intro to economics class. He was everything I wasn't, loud in an endearing way, always asking questions, always chasing opportunity. He worked 2 jobs and dreamed of becoming someone important. I admired that about him. It wasn't long before he noticed me. I helped him pass our midterm. He bought me coffee in return. We started studying together, then sitting closer in lecture halls, and then, one day, he kissed me in the library elevator. That was the beginning. I never told him the whole truth about my life. Not out of shame, out of fear that if he knew who I really was, he wouldn't see me. He'd only see the money. So I told him I did freelance work in financial analytics. Technically true. I managed assets and made quiet investments from a laptop that held more secrets than my entire dorm room. I read quarterly reports before bed and tracked market trends before breakfast. I moved millions with a keystroke, while he thought I was balancing spreadsheets for small clients. We dated through undergrad, and by the time we graduated, we were already living together. He got into a top grad program in San Diego. I followed him there and covered the rent on a modest apartment. He never asked how. He assumed I had saved up. I let him think that. I let him feel like the provider. Every time the bills were paid, every time the car got fixed, every time groceries magically appeared in the fridge, he said thanks like I'd pulled off a minor miracle. He never knew I was drawing funds from a trust account built on tech investments that had exploded while he slept. We got married on a foggy Thursday morning in a courthouse with no flowers and no family. He said we couldn't afford a big wedding, and I agreed. I didn't need to flaunt it. I wanted a life, not a show. I thought I was being humble. I thought I was doing the right thing. For a long time, I believed we were happy. He called me his rock. He said I grounded him. I supported his dreams with everything I had. When he wanted to launch a business, I wired the startup funds anonymously through an angel donor. When he got accepted into a competitive tech incubator in Arizona, I covered the tuition. He never asked how I did it. I never offered the truth. He assumed I was just a very clever freelancer. I thought it didn't matter. I thought love was enough. But over time, something shifted. He started to believe the story he told other people that he was self-made, that he had built everything with grit and long nights. I never corrected him. I didn't need applause. But it started to sting. He'd say things like, "I bought our house, even though I made the down payment." He'd joke that I helped out, even though I handled every tax return and every legal document. Still, I stayed silent. I let him have the stage. I told myself it was okay because we were a team. But then the distance started. He stopped talking to me about his goals. He stopped sharing ideas. He was always on his phone, texting someone with a secretive grin. He began traveling more. Business, he said. Always business. I believed him until I didn't. The first red flag wasn't a message. It wasn't a phone call. It was the way he stopped looking at me. No warmth, no curiosity, like I was a placeholder. One night he came home late. I was in bed, pretending to be asleep. His phone buzzed. I saw the name Sabrina. I didn't recognize it, but I felt it. I didn't snoop, not at first. I waited. I watched. He started posting less about us and more about hustle and grind and building an empire. I was disappearing from the picture literally. Then, one afternoon, he left his laptop open on the kitchen counter. I wasn't looking for anything, but there it was. An open folder. Photos. Dozens of them. Eli on a yacht. Eli at a beachside dinner. Eli kissing a woman with bleached blonde hair and a designer bikini. I stared at the screen for so long my eyes blurred. There were shots from Paris, from Dubai, from Tulum, none of them with me. My stomach twisted into a knot I couldn't undo. I closed the laptop and sat in silence. I waited until he got home. I asked him, softly, "Is there something you need to tell me?" He rolled his eyes, said I was paranoid. I told him I saw the pictures. He didn't deny it. He didn't apologize. He said, "You were comfortable. She's not. She wants more." I was shaking. I told him I had given him everything. He shrugged. "Exactly," he said. "You gave it all away too easily." He picked up a bag he had packed earlier and walked out. No goodbye, just the sound of the door clicking shut. I sat on the floor that night in our apartment, no, my apartment, and cried until there was nothing left. In the morning, I opened my laptop, the same one that had been funding his dreams all along, and I made a different kind of investment. Not in him, not anymore, but in myself. That was the day I stopped hiding. That was the day the real story began. After he left, I didn't tell anyone. I didn't post a breakup quote or throw out his things. I simply existed in the silence he left behind. For the first few weeks, I moved like a ghost through our apartment, no, through my apartment. Everything still smelled like him. His favorite mug sat untouched in the sink. The chair where he used to work was still pushed slightly away from the desk like he'd return at any minute, but he wouldn't. I didn't chase him. I didn't call. And while part of me ached with betrayal, another part of me, one that had been quiet for too long, began to wake up. I started my mornings early again. No more waiting for his alarm to go off, no more planning my day around his chaos. I restructured my schedule, checked on investments I had let sit, rebalanced portfolios that had long been left to grow on autopilot. For the first time in years, I looked at my own life like it was something worth tending to, not just a place where someone else got to build theirs. I called Jules, my assistant, and told her I was ready to get back to work at full capacity. She didn't ask questions. She never did. She simply said, "Welcome back." It took less than 48 hours to reestablish every connection I had let fade during my marriage. Within a week, I was fielding proposals again, reviewing acquisition opportunities, and analyzing the performance metrics of the same companies influencers were flooding social media with. It was during one of these reviews that I saw her, Sabrina, the woman from the pictures. She had just signed a 3-month promotional deal with a luxury wellness brand I quietly held shares in. Her face was everywhere on their homepage, in paid collaborations, on billboards in LA. She was building an empire, or so it looked. I watched her curated perfection with a detached sort of amusement. She reminded me of girls I used to go to prep school with, always in control of the lighting, always careful with angles, everything real hidden under filters and quotes about ambition. I didn't envy her. I didn't hate her. I simply saw the hollow underneath the glitter. One afternoon, Jules brought me a report on the brand's recent engagement surge and revenue spike. A significant chunk of that came directly from Sabrina's campaign. I smiled, signed off on additional stock purchases, and moved on. I didn't need to announce anything. I knew exactly how the story would play out. I wouldn't destroy her. I didn't want to, but I would own the table she thought she was sitting at. I started with her image, not her personally, but the framework that supported her. The condo she shared with Eli wasn't hard to trace. They posted just enough for my people to piece it together: unique balcony railings, a painting from a lobby shot, a faint logo on a gym towel. Within a week, I had the address. I sent it to Clarence, my property acquisitions manager, with a single line: "Let's buy it." The purchase went through under an LLC that couldn't be linked to me. I didn't raise the rent. I didn't evict them in some petty, dramatic way. I simply let the lease expire and didn't renew it. 30 days notice, clean and professional. They had to leave. No fanfare, no idea why. I didn't watch them move. I didn't need to. I knew what that silence would feel like. Disorientation, loss of control, the ground beneath them shifting without warning. That was enough. But I wasn't finished. I'd always believed revenge wasn't something you served cold, it was something you outgrew. So I didn't linger on their exit. I focused on their next platform. The wellness brand Sabrina promoted. I increased my stake. Then I quietly acquired the parent company that owned their digital licensing rights. I waited. When her contract came up for renewal, the legal team sent her a standard notice. "We're moving in a different direction." No explanation, just a door closing. She vanished from their site overnight. To her followers, it looked like she was rebranding, but I knew she had lost the biggest anchor of her image. The next blow came softer but cut deeper. I took a minority stake in the PR firm that handled most of her influencer outreach. I didn't need to give instructions, I just paid attention. In a matter of weeks, the flow of invites slowed. Brand deals dipped. Her name lost priority in event placements. Not removed, just replaced. Her light dimmed and she didn't know why. That was the difference between presence and power. Presence needs to be seen. Power can move unseen. Eli didn't notice at first. He thought it was algorithm shifts or market noise. He had no idea that the woman he left was no longer just watching from afar. She was holding the strings behind the curtain. I didn't do it out of spite. I did it because it was mine to take. They had built their fantasy on a foundation I had quietly laid. I just decided to take it back. The most surprising part wasn't how easily I could reclaim it. It was how little I cared once I did. There was no satisfaction in seeing her struggle, no thrill in removing his comfort. What moved me wasn't destruction, it was rebuilding. But this time, for me. I started planning something new, a venture I'd put off for years, a boutique fund focused on backing women-led startups in underfunded sectors, not for publicity, not for recognition, just because I could. One morning, as I was reviewing early pitches, Jules handed me a card. "From an old contact," she said. It was an invitation to speak at a private finance summit in New York. The topic, legacy and the power of quiet capital. I almost declined, but something told me this was different. This wasn't about proving myself. It was about stepping into the space I had earned. I accepted. And that's when everything began to shift. Again. The conference was held in a quiet wing of a private hotel in Manhattan, not one of the overdone grand halls, but a place where the real decisions happened carpeted, discreet, with soft lighting and guarded elevators. Everyone there walked like they had nothing to prove and everything to protect. I arrived wearing a navy pantsuit with no labels, carrying a notebook and a calm mind. I wasn't the youngest in the room, but I was one of the few women. That didn't intimidate me. It energized me. I wasn't there for flash. I was there for foundation. The panel topic was simple: wealth, legacy, and the power of silence. When it was my turn to speak, I didn't rehearse. I didn't tell them where I went to school or drop names of unicorn startups I had touched. I talked about strategy, about patience, about not needing to be the loudest person in the room to shape the market. I told them I believed in building portfolios like cathedrals, slowly, beautifully, with attention to what lasts. I said influence built on visibility is fragile, but ownership is quiet and permanent. I saw heads nod. I saw something deeper than applause respect. After the panel, a few investors approached me. No handshakes loaded with performance, just interest, real curiosity. One of them mentioned he had seen my name in a Forbes article recently. I had almost forgotten it had been published. It wasn't flashy. A simple headline: The Hidden Strategist, Camille Rhodes and the Rise of Quiet Power. It told just enough her net worth, her fund structure, her impact, but didn't go into the story behind the silence. That was by design. But apparently, the article traveled. I received 3 new partnership requests that week. A private wealth management firm offered to merge under my leadership. Even a venture philanthropy group requested I serve as a silent board advisor. I said yes to none of them. Not out of arrogance, but because I had learned to wait. The best offers come more than once. And that week, so did something else. A message from Eli. I saw his name on my phone like it had never left. My first instinct was to ignore it, but curiosity won for 1 minute. I opened it. The message was long. Longer than anything he'd ever sent me, even when we were in love. He said he read the article, said he was stunned, said he always knew I was smart but didn't realize I was that powerful. He wrote that he missed how peaceful life used to be with me, how I made things feel stable. He admitted that things with Sabrina weren't what they seemed, that life felt noisy and unpredictable, that he couldn't stop thinking about how I made everything look effortless. I read the words without emotion, not because they didn't matter, but because they were late. So late they didn't even echo anymore. I didn't reply. Instead, I forwarded the message to Jules, who crafted the response I had used once before. Miss Rhodes wishes you well. It was simple, professional, and final. I blocked his number, not out of hate, but out of peace. I had no desire to reopen something that had already closed itself with such certainty. The days after that were strangely calm. No more ghosts showing up in my inbox, no more uninvited memories. I began to sleep with the windows open again. I played music in the morning while brushing my teeth. I read poetry before bed, something I hadn't done since college. I was healing in ways that didn't need to be witnessed. One afternoon, as I walked through the garden of a property I had recently acquired in upstate New York, I realized something so simple it made me stop mid-step. I wasn't angry anymore, not at Eli, not at Sabrina, not even at myself. The girl who had begged him to stay that version of me, I no longer resented her. I honored her, because she had loved fully, and that was never a weakness. She had been willing to give everything, and that meant she had nothing to regret. But now she was gone. In her place stood a woman who had learned that love isn't about how much you give to someone else, it's about how much of yourself you keep. I stood in that garden, surrounded by trees I had planted, pathways I had designed, and land I had paid for in full, and I felt something I hadn't in years. Ownership, not just of a place, but of a life. One I had built, brick by careful brick, with no one watching. And that was the point. I didn't need the world to see. I just needed to know. And I did. The morning light in the hills of Rhinebeck was softer than I remembered. It filtered through the tall windows of my study and landed on the oak desk I had chosen 3 years ago when I first purchased the property. I sat with a cup of black tea, not for energy, but for ritual. It was quiet. No notifications buzzing, no voices in other rooms, no one to explain myself to. And it was in that stillness that I realized I had arrived. Not at a destination others would recognize as triumph, no trophies, no speeches, no magazine covers with my face, but something rarer, something quieter. A life that belonged entirely to me. Outside, the wildflowers I had planted last spring were blooming. I had hired a local gardener, not because I couldn't do it myself, but because I loved the way she spoke to the soil. She reminded me of my grandmother's soft hands, sharp eyes, and no tolerance for weeds. We rarely talked about money. We talked about roots, about things that stayed. That same morning, Jules sent me an alert. A company I had acquired partial ownership of through a long chain of shell firms was trending on social media. The reason? Sabrina had posted a vague message about being silently pushed out of several deals, about how the system was rigged against women who tried to make it in their own way. She didn't name names, but she didn't have to. The comments were full of guesses, support, drama, pity. I didn't read them. I had no interest in watching the unraveling. It wasn't my job to punish her, and it never had been. That was the difference between what she thought power looked like and what it truly was. Power doesn't broadcast. It doesn't lash out. It removes itself. That afternoon, as I walked through the second level of my library, I paused in front of a framed photo I had never taken down. It was of me and Eli at graduation. We were both smiling, young and full of illusions. I didn't feel pain when I looked at it, just distance, like watching a film in a language I no longer spoke. Later that week, an invitation came in. A private gala for a foundation that funded scholarships for women in STEM. They asked if I'd attend not as a donor, but as a speaker. For a moment, I hesitated. Visibility wasn't my game. But this felt different. Not performance, purpose. I accepted. The night of the gala, I wore a deep green dress, simple but precise. No designer name flashed, no glitter, just silk that moved like I belonged in every room I entered. When I stepped into the ballroom, heads turned, not out of awe, but out of recognition. The kind that comes when people finally connect the dots between what they've seen and what they've never known. I gave a short speech, spoke about the importance of building in silence, of resisting the pressure to constantly prove. I told them that wealth is not just what you own, it's what you can afford to walk away from. There was a pause when I finished. A silence, not from lack of applause, but from reflection. That's when I saw him, Eli, across the room, older, tired in the eyes in a way he hadn't been before. He looked at me like he wasn't sure if I was real, like seeing me here, in this light, shattered the version of me he had held on to. He didn't approach me that night, and I didn't offer an opening. Some ghosts are better left untouched. The next morning, Jules told me he had left a note with the concierge. I never opened it. I didn't need to. Whatever he had to say no longer mattered. My story wasn't about him anymore. It never truly was. It was about the woman I had become when no one was watching. The one who rose not through vengeance but through discipline, through stillness, through the refusal to break herself down just to make someone else feel tall. I donated a portion of my gala honorarium to fund a program for first-generation college girls who wanted to study economics. I asked that it be anonymous. I didn't want gratitude. I wanted cycles broken, patterns rewritten. That was legacy. In the weeks that followed, I traveled to Lisbon, then Kyoto, then back home again. I read more, wrote more, laughed louder than I had in years. My home wasn't just a property anymore. It was a reflection. Every chair, every book, every window placed with intention. It didn't need to be big. It just needed to be mine. One evening, as I stood on the back porch watching the sun dip below the tree line, I thought of her again, the girl who knelt on the floor, begging a man to stay. I didn't pity her. I didn't scold her. I honored her, because she loved with everything she had, and because she had the strength to let go when it hurt most. Now I stood in her place, in the quiet she made possible. Not because I changed who I was, but because I finally stopped hiding it. He once said I lacked ambition, that I didn't understand what real drive looked like. He was wrong. Real ambition doesn't shout, it builds. Silently, relentlessly, it doesn't chase the spotlight. It owns the stage without needing to be seen. I don't wear the brands, I fund them, I don't beg anymore. I choose, and every day I choose me.